So if you're thinking of a deck replacement, chances are yours looks something like this, with holes blown through all over the place, lots of rust and patches everywhere, so clearly this deck has had it, so time to replace it. So over here we have a new one straight out of the box. Let's pull that out, have a quick look at it. Now you'll notice on your old mower there's a badge with an article number on. It's key that you look at the article number to get your correct part. Here are the tools you need, a few extra ones. Okay, let's get started. First of all, we can discard the grass box. Use the flat blade screwdriver to unclip these cable holders. Take off the name badge. And remove the front hubcaps. Now we want to get it to top dead center, so if we pull the cable back gently, we'll feel when we hit maximum resistance, and that'll give us top dead center, and that's to stop oil draining out when we tip it on its side, so we can release that starter cable and disconnect the spark plug. Now we tip it on its side. I'm using some old crate to support it. Now we're going to use a block of wood to stop the rotation of the cutting blade as we use the large socket, the 17mm, to undo this bolt to remove the blade. Now I'm going to put a little sticker on to tell me which way up that blade goes, because I historically made the mistake of putting it on upside down, and that makes a mess of your lawn when you do it. So now we're going to remove the belt cover. This is using the 13mm socket. It's just two nuts. Next I have a cable tie holding this tension spring in place, because it quite often pops off, so you might need to do that yourself. Then we want to get the drive belt off using a screwdriver to give it leverage. We can just turn by hand and we can pop it off the pulley wheel. and then just push it back to unhook it from the rear pulley wheel. Now take the tension spring off the gearbox, so your gearbox will now swing around. Now the side discharge flapper, you need to undo those two bolts using the 10mm spanner. Right, so these are the 3 engine bolts, 2 at the rear and 1 at the front. So we're going to loosen those off just slightly. We're just looking there where the cable is attached to the gearbox. So let's undo the handlebars and just shift those down to give us some free play on the cables. And now we're going to disconnect the drive cable, because there should be enough slack in it. If we pull hard, we can unhook it from the operating lever. See, it's come free now. There's our 2 handles for the handlebars. So using the 13mm spanner, just loosen those 3 engine mount bolts off slightly. For some reason my front engine bolt is slightly different from the other 2. You'll see when I get them off. Yours are probably 3 the same. So just loosen them off, but only like 1 turn, so that you can then do it by hand. So I'm going to take the front one out first. You can see with my front bolt, it's not a standard just nut bolt. It seems to be a fused old nut which I can't undo. So whereas the rear 2 bolts, the bolt is on the top and there's just a nut on the bottom. So if we take that nut off the bottom, it'll drop off and the bolt can pull out from the top. So there's the 3 engine bolts, 2 on the right are the rear and that odd one is the front one. on mine. You may have it slightly different. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift the engine off onto those two blocks that we've already put aside. So move the handlebars and cables first and make sure they're not tangled. Then we can just lift the engine straight off and leave it on these blocks. Though of course we're still connected to the body by one cable which goes to the gearbox. And now we're going to take off the front wheels, and we'll be using the 13mm socket for that. We'll just put the nut and washer back on so we don't lose them. Do the same on the other side. Now we need to adjust the cutting height using the handle so that we can disconnect this connecting rod which adjusts the height of the cut. There's a circlip on the end there and there's a pin. It's quite useful to use a pair of mole grips to hold in the right position, and this circlip you need to push it forwards and then pull the end up and then push it back. And you may need to use a drift to knock this pin out. Note there is a washer between those two parts, so make sure you remember where that goes. So now that height adjustment bar is loose at the front. Next we're going to remove the whole rear axle. So both the height adjustment handle and that bar, the two red items there, are connected directly to the rear axle. So we don't want to take the wheels off here, we want to take the whole axle in one unit. So turn it upside down. Now the reason we need to move the handle so that you can see we can access those two screws which hold the axle in place at each end. We also need to be able to get access to the gearbox so we can disconnect the cable, but it's quite hard to get it off until after you partly remove the axle Plus you can see exactly where the cable goes if you don't disconnect it until you've partially pulled the axle out. So I'm going to remove these 4 screws. I find it useful to level the thing out by propping the front up on a bucket or something. Now we have to pull this handle out of its height adjustment holes so that we can move the axle. So we pull it up slightly, and that means we can rotate the gearbox, pull the cable through so you've got more slack. So we can pull it out and roll it over slightly, so now we can get a good look at how the cable is connected to the linkage. And you'll see that there's a metal collar on the end of the cable which slots into the other side of the gearbox. So now we can disconnect this cable. And pull it back out through the housing. Now finally disconnected from all of the handlebars and cables and engine. So now we can lift the whole assembly off the body and put it aside, remembering its orientation, which will make it easier to get back on later. We can now discard that bucket. So now we're going to remove the handlebar. So that's single screw in the centre. There's one each side holding the lower handlebar into the body. It's just a straight Phillips screw. And now we can pull the handlebar out. Now this looked like it came out easy, and this wasn't the first time I did it. the very first time I took it off, it was really difficult to get out. That's why the screw holds it in. You can see the hole in the handlebar. But you might find that it's really difficult to get out and you have to apply some force. And I found that was because over the years, the lower part of the handlebar had rusted. Let's not forget to take out the grommet from the body. Now to remove this cover, it's using the T20, just 2 screws, comes off easy. Now the whole rear plastic housing is attached to the body using those 2 screws to each side, so take those out next. Again, it's a Phillips screw head. Now notice the end of the deck goes inside the edge of the plastic housing at the bottom 2 corners, and also there's a tab on the top which we don't really notice when we're taking it off, but you need to worry about it when you're putting it back on. So you can just ease it off. And it pulls straight back, and the tab on the top goes into that hole you see, or the slot above the large grass exit hole. And you can just see the tab there on the left hand side at the top. Now going back to the problem of getting those handlebars out, you'll see I had such trouble the first time I did this that I drilled these drain holes in the bottom so that water wouldn't build up and rust the bottom of the pipes, causing them to expand and make them really difficult to get out. So I suggest you might want to drill a couple of drain holes. I use a 3mm drill through the plastic. Right, next we're going to take off this front housing, and that's done using taking off these small T20 screws, the smaller ones. We don't want to touch the larger ones at this point because they hold the axle to the deck. So we're just taking out these small ones, and there's actually 7 of them. So 5 you can see on there, but 2 others which you probably can't see because of all the dirt actually on the body here, and they're quite badly worn, those 2. But a good tip here is these screws are the same screws that secured the small strip of plastic across the top of the rear housing, and so you could interchange those screws because the 2 on the rear housing will not be worn at all, whereas the 2 on the body might be very bad. And then once you've got those screws out, you just tap it and it'll come loose and you can pull it straight off. There's a bumper on the bottom which is now loose as well, which will come off. So now put that aside. Now we're going to look at this front axle, take that off. So as we saw, it's secured by 4 hex, so H4 hex. So we can now undo those, and you'll probably find that the springs will, as it gets loose, the springs will probably just fall off. And the mounting has a profile, so it can only go one way around. You'll see against the body, which has a dip. So that's the axle off, and we'll just put it back together so we can remember how it works and put that aside. So that completes the removal. Now we should clean up all the parts before we reassemble with the new deck.